SCOD School Lecture Series, Professors Ben Harrison and Drogo Ben recorded dialogue number 1. Today we're going to discuss competition, success, compassion, and commerce, and how these apply to the arts and specifically the music industry and scene locally. What are your thoughts on competition, specifically in your music career?
I think that the most interesting thing kind of about the idea of competition in music and the arts in general is that there's this perception that you're not supposed to be competing, right? Like, you want this idea of success, but I'm doing the art for art's sake. You know, I'm doing it to get my art out there, not, oh, I'm trying to be better than this person, or better than that person, or more successful than this person, right? But like we were discussing in a previous conversation, just because you don't think you're competing doesn't mean you're not competing. Doesn't mean that the competition isn't going on. It just means you're less likely to win if you don't think you're competing.
Right, just because you don't act like an asshole doesn't mean you're not involved in a
someone else's
industry.
Yeah, exactly. It just means that the assholes will win. So, I mean, what it really comes down to is, what is the nature of competition in art? Which I think, not to jump over too quickly to the other, but it really draws in with the idea of success, right? I mean, that is the heart of competition in some ways, is you're trying to succeed, especially in the arts. That's what the competition's about. There's only so many people that are going to become a successful musician or a successful visual artist.
Financially or commercially, or
however you decide to do it.
What about happiness defining success as contentedness with your own craft, like a famous musician that, or you don't even have to be famous, but somebody that only plays for themselves, but they're happy just playing in their bedroom to themselves or singing in the shower. Can they be successful at singing in the shower?
If their note of what success is, if their concept of what success is, then yes. Now, so the question is, you got to step back and say, are we talking about only success from your personal perspective? What is success to me? Or are we looking at a larger objective view of success? And how do you define that? I think the general rule for me in success as far as art goes, whether it be music or visual or whatever, is that you can sustain yourself through your art somehow, right?
Oh.
Whether it's financially or emotionally.
Oh, okay.
You know, that somehow that is success. You know, I think that's the kind of the archetypical idea of what, if you're a successful musician, that means you play music for your living, right?
Even if you're just paid by a wealthy benefactor.
Sure.
And
I mean, finding a wealthy benefactor that is willing to make sure that you can focus on your art, which is really, I think, what that comes down to. And I think that's where again, getting back to the beginning of, there's this idea that we think, we're supposed to just be doing it for art's sake, but there does end up being competition and a view of success. And I think what that comes out of is that, people want to have a sense, not just from themselves generally, but from others, that they are good at what they do, and that what they do is appreciated.
Right.
In our culture, that usually means money. Although it could just be recognition. It doesn't necessarily have to be money. But to be able to focus on your music.
Mm-hmm.
No musician has as much time to play music as they wish they had unless they're successful, right?
Huh.
So it may not be that you make a lot of money off it, but if you can make enough money that music can be what you do and how you define yourself, then that's a success.
Do you think you can be a successful part-time musician?
Yes.
Oh.
I personally think a lot of musicians that are happy musicians are musicians that play in a local bar or a local band and play gigs on Fridays and Saturday nights,
mm-hmm.
and people dance and they feel good about it and they get up there and boom. And, they may not make a ton of money off it, but it makes their life more complete and hopefully brings in a little bit of financial stability to their lives, or a little bit of something.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of musicians say that they don't do it for the money. They don't even like to think about money, and it's not just a few. It seems like many musicians say that. Mm-hmm. While they have to pay bills. I think it is true to a large extent, because they get a fulfillment, a satisfaction from the adrenaline rush and the excitement of playing, and then the aftermath of feeling that surge, and that you've entertained. There's a social dynamic.
And a sense of accomplishment for having performed well, or for having written something that got to people, that people could feel in their hearts and felt that they were a part of an experience. Yeah, I think success can be done in a lot of ways. I do feel, though, that, to get back to the idea of competition within that, that there is this sense, again, that I think a lot of artists try to ignore, that there is a competition going on, right? There are only so many venues to play in our area, for instance.
But what if our two bands, we don't even play out? So that's not really competition, in my view, because we're not going to cut you out of playing at a venue.
That's true. Now, competition in this world, in our biosphere, I feel like comes in all types of places, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's just one. That's just that venue competition.
Right. That's just one facet.
There's other friendly competition, and
there's the competition for time. There's a competition going on. Every member of your band, there's a competition going on. How much time can you put into the band?
Right.
There's a competition going on
within the band. Sure.
And a competition going on within how that band relates to the outside world. In a perfect world,
right,
we could wake up in the morning, we could play our music, we could do the things that we want to do. There would always be a venue ready for us to play, and there would always be plenty of people to come that would enjoy it.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's build that.
Right? Yeah, but the resources that are limited aren't just, it's not just competition for money, right? It's a competition for other people's time, the audience. I've had gigs where I played on a Friday night, but there was another band playing somewhere nearby on a Friday night.
Oh, yeah.
And so nobody's at my show.
And they didn't mean to.
Right. It wasn't an intentional thing. Right. It's not an intentional thing. And a lot of the time, they may have wished they could have gone to see, my band or the other band if they came to my show,
True.
But there's always...
we're limited in what we can do.
Exactly. Well, and there's competition from the perspective of the audience, right? Hey, I should really stay home and do my laundry. Hey, I should really, So you're competing with not only the things that your audience needs to do, but their own laziness and your own laziness, which is probably the largest competition, honestly, with most musicians I know. Right.
Human limitations would include laziness.
Right, exactly. Absolutely. And so there's a constant, I think competition is going on all the time in the art world. And some people relish it, right?
Oh, yeah.
In the big city or in Nashville, there are people that thrive off that competition, right? That I'm, there's 10 bands playing tonight, and I'm going to kick the shit out of the other 9 bands.
Right, and you show up to see the other band just so you can say, boo, you suck.
Right, exactly. And some people thrive off that. But I don't necessarily think it's a good idea. If you want to get to the next level, of success, I think no matter how you define success, I think you need to be aware that there is competition. Because you may have some control over what is the competition and how do I define success.
Right.
But to pretend that it doesn't exist really makes it, you are taking yourself out of the equation of whether or not you're going to succeed.
Have you met a person that thinks that competition doesn't exist in a field? Are they living in a bubble? Or?
I think a lot of people act like it doesn't. I think a lot of people don't think about it.
Really?
I think a lot of, especially musicians, I think a lot of them don't, they're just like, oh man, I'm in this band, and we're just going to play, and it's going to be awesome. And they're not necessarily conscious or conscientious of the fact that it is, to a certain extent, a competition, depending on how you define success.
They're really not aware that people around them are competitive about it?
I know a lot of bands that don't even look to see, for instance, what other bands are playing on a night that they're going to book a show.
Because they build walls to maintain mentality of oblivion?
Yeah, maybe. or that they haven't been conscious of it or haven't thought about it, or because they view their art as somehow supposing to be above that they refuse to bring it into the equation of what they do for their music. You know, they're going to book this place, oh, we got this gig on this Saturday. They don't even think about the fact that, oh, there's another band playing this Saturday next door that has a big following. And you'd be better off to play Friday night because you'll get a lot more people to come see you. You know, like a lot of bands I think don't even think about those things, right? You know.
Okay.
I think being aware and trying to be conscious of what your ideas of success is going to make you much more likely to find that success. I mean, you can minimize competition and you can define success however you want, and it may be much easier to succeed. For instance, if your idea of success is to be in a band that you personally feel makes good music and follows what you're trying to do, then if you can get a good group of musicians together and make that music, then that can be your success. If what you want out of success in your music, for instance, or in art, is to have shows where a lot of people show up and you make money, then that's a much more difficult, it's a much more difficult thing.
Right.
And I think you need to be more conscious of it.
We'll get to that part at the end with the local commerce and money-making financial aspects. But, okay, so, but when famous musicians are asked about other musicians, I think the most respectable ones will often disengage or act oblivious to saying something critical of another musician. Now, they may stroke their ego a little bit and say, oh, so-and-so, they need to do this or that. That's not how I like to do it. But a lot of times they'll say, oh, that musician is a different person. They're not me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. I do think, and one of the reasons why I like the art world is because I think there is at least an ideal to minimize competition. There's more of a sense of respect for what other people are doing. Because once you've been a person standing on front of a stage, or standing up on a stage, performing something that you have put together for other people, it's tough not to respect other people that do that, right?
Right.
And the fact is,
if you're trying to follow the golden rule of do unto others as you would like done unto you.
Well, I think a lot of musicians are better at respecting other musicians than they are at the golden rule. I think there's almost something deeper, because
the bond of music.
The bond of music, or maybe a little bit of fear.
What do you mean?
Well, you say it's bad. No one wants to have their ego hurt by people talking crap about their music.
Right.
So there's almost like a built-in trigger that makes the golden rule easier to follow, almost, I think, in the music world. Because, I'm not going to go diss some band that I see play because I don't want them to diss me.
Okay.
Which is the golden rule in a nutshell. But it may be more direct than a lot of people perceive the golden rule in their general life, right? And most of the people that I think make the art world and the music world tough, i.e. critics, or people that have the purse strings and the money and stuff, are people that are not up there on the stage. They are not the musicians. They are not the artists that are putting themselves out there. And since they are not putting their souls out there, it's much easier for them to be critical, right?
So you mentioned competition can be a way of life. Do you feel like it's a way of life in what way?
I do feel like it is in a personal sense. There's a constant competition in my life for having enough time for music, for having enough energy for music. And that comes down to what the idea of success is. For me, success would be to be able to focus on my art, and to be able to make it a true priority, right? The competition for resources of my time, of my money, of my values, of my love, of everything that I got, that's a constant competition going on. And I personally, and I think that's why so many people stop. When I was 18, 19, I knew 30 guitar players.
Wow.
I knew all types of people that played music. And
wow.
Almost all of them have stopped.
Really?
The only people that stick with it are people that find a way to carve out that niche in their life that they somehow have allowed in that competition for time. They've allowed art to win.
Okay.
Maybe not a straight out win, but to at least win a seat at the table, right? You know, so that at least, you know, like I make myself play music. You know, I give myself 2 days a week, you know, that I'm gonna play music. You know, if band practice is canceled, I will sit at home and play music.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and I still don't do it as much as I should. You know, I always tell myself, oh, I'm gonna play an hour a day plus band practice. So far, I'm not in a position where I can do that. You know, but for instance, you talk about what a view of success is. If I, in my life and ancillary, if the people around me, the people that have effect on my life, for instance, my fiance, not to get too far into the commerce thing, but if I was bringing in $300 a week playing music, the people in my life, my mother, my fiance, my father, my coworkers, would be much more understanding of me putting time and effort into music.
You would probably be less involved in their lives, possibly. Although you work,
at least the coworkers. Yeah.
You work really hard now, but if you were a bigger musician, it seems like they have to tour.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's trade-offs.
I don't know.
But also, if you can tour and make money, then when you come back,
right,
you don't have to. You could, you know, like the musicians that I know that make it, you know, they may go on tour for a month, but then they can come home and they can hang out for 2 or 3 weeks where they don't have to go out and work, and so they can take their loved ones out to dinner. And
I would love to study if anybody fails economically on tours. I imagine
I'm sure some do.
So some would come home, and
I'm sure it happens all the time.
Even if they've gotten notoriety.
Oh yeah. I think, well, and depending on how much money you spend, I mean, you can make pretty good money playing shows, and you can spend every dime you make between getting there, alcohol, drugs,
giving money to people,
paying your roadies, you know, like
randomly
throwing money around,
burning money.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can definitely lose, you know, as much as you're making, if not more.
Losing money just by, like, where'd that bag go of money?
Right. Well, and so I probably get more into that, talking about the commerce, but I think that's why, for instance, a good road manager, something like that, becomes very important. You know, someone who can
worry about that stuff that the musicians don't want to have.
That you don't want to have to worry about.
Yeah,
you know, someone that can focus on that,
that makes
for
sense.
you. The bands I've seen that do well usually have a manager. Not just like someone who manages the band, but like a road manager, someone who's on tour with them, who books the hotel rooms, you know, who pays attention to be like, well, hey, we can stay 10 miles further out and get this room for $30 instead of being downtown for $80.